What's going on, folks? Ted from Immersion here, and as promised, we're continuing with our Heroes of Faerun coverage. This time, we're going to be talking all about circle magic. If you missed out on what that is, circle magic is, well, it's not a new type of magic in the world of Dungeons & Dragons, but it is new to us here in 5th edition. This is the concept of multiple spellcasters coming together to improve or enhance or alter in some way the casting of one or several other kinds of spells. Some have specific circle magic applications, others just can be augmented by the nature of circle magic. So if you like this kind of stuff and you like what I do here, consider subscribing to the channel, and feel free to let me know in the comments if there's something that I'm not technically planning to cover from this book that you'd like to see me cover in the future. Let's dive in. Now, I will say at the beginning, there actually is a lot of interesting information at this Magic of Faerun chapter, which Magic of Faerun also happened to be the name of at least a 3rd edition source book for the Forgotten Realms. You do have a lot of other interesting information that if you're new to the world of Dungeons & Dragons or the Forgotten Realms, it might be worth checking out. Basically, this whole section here on the weave, talking about what the weave is, how it, different spells affect the weave, things like detect magic, dispel magic, dead magic, wild magic, and those sections that are in the associated part of the Dungeon Master's Guide. What high magic is, which is also referenced briefly in Adventures in Faerun, the second book we'll be covering here. What a mythal is, like talking about things like mythals from Mythdraenor and things of that nature. Also, probably my favorite piece of art here is Presto showing down against Venger, pulling Blade of Disaster out of the Hat of Many Spells. A very cool picture. I might make a short on this just because, but we're here to talk about circle magic. So, it says, millennia ago, elf mages researched alternative magical traditions, developing a technique by which many casters working together could go beyond the limits of a traditional spell. What is a circle spell? When a group of spellcasters collectively channel their magic into a single spell, they can enhance and augment the spell's magic in powerful ways. A spell cast in this way is known as a circle spell. Any spell that has a casting time of 1 action or 1 minute or longer and is cast using a spell slot can be cast as circle magic. So that's kind of your main qualifier, right? So think about any spells that you've either homebrewed or you have from a third-party source or the player's handbook or this book or any other D&D 5e book. The ruling is if it has the casting time of 1 action or 1 minute or longer, aka it's not a reaction, it's not a bonus action, and it's using a spell slot, so if it's coming from a magic item, technically that doesn't count, it can be cast as a circle spell. To cast a circle spell, follow the rules typically for spell casting, with the following circle magic rules. So casting a circle spell. Whoever is there is a designated primary caster, which let's say it's going to be you, the royal you out here on the internet are the caster, the primary caster. So unless otherwise specified, you as the primary caster decide what the spell's target are. You're going to be the one maintaining concentration on it if the spell has concentration, and you're going to be the one providing the spell components, assuming there are spell components for it, and decide anything else that's part of the spell. So you're kind of the anchor, if you will, right? So I want to target that enemy. I'm going to maintain concentration. It costs, 1,000 gold pieces worth of whatever. I've got it, okay? All of the effects originate from you, the primary caster. Initiating a circle spell. You take a magic action to initiate casting a circle spell. When you do so, choose which circle casting option, which we'll get to in a second, you are choosing for this casting. You must also meet any other requirements described in that option's text. Until the circle magic casting is complete, you must maintain concentration on the spell. If a reaction would trigger when a creature casts a spell, such as the reaction taken using counterspell, it also triggers when you take this action to initiate a circle spell. That's an important distinction because technically you're not taking the magic action to cast a spell. You're taking the magic action to initiate casting a circle spell, but they are referring and confirming here that counterspell does work against that. Secondary caster. So this is obviously anybody who's a part of this, but not the primary caster. Casting a circle spell requires that one or more spellcasters, called secondary casters, lend their magic to the spell. Secondary caster must have either the spellcasting or packed magic feature to participate in a circle spell. So again, not somebody who can cast a spell, because there are plenty of species, there are class features, whatever. It's not you need to be a spell caster. That's the differentiation, right? If you're a Wild Heart Barbarian, technically you can cast Speak with Animals as a ritual. You are considered a spellcaster because you can cast a spell, but you do not have the spell casting or packed magic features. That's an important distinction there. After you initiate the spell, each secondary caster takes the magic action to contribute to that spell. A secondary caster can take this action only while they're within 30 feet of you and before the start of your next turn. Completing the casting. If the spell has a casting time of an action, the circle spell's effect occur immediately after the final secondary caster takes the required action to contribute to the spell. You decide which secondary caster is the final one. If the spell has a casting time of 1 minute or more, you and each secondary caster must take the magic action on each of your turns for the entire casting time, and you must each maintain concentration while you do so. This isn't much different than like holding a spell or something like that. If it's a longer casting time, you have to concentrate on continuing to cast the spell. If it's a one action spell, you cast the spell, you initiate the circle spell. Whenever the final caster involved in it does their action to do the magic action, then the circle spell will go off. Right, as it says right here. The circle spell's effect occur immediately after the final secondary caster. In this case, if any caster's concentration is broken, so if you're doing a longer duration one and any caster's concentration is broken, the spell fails. NPC secondary casters. Some circle spells require secondary casters to expend one or more spell slots to participate in the spell's casting. At the DM's discretion, NPCs capable of casting spells, such as spellcasters hired in settlements, can meet this requirement by spending one or more limited use of any spells of the same level or higher in place of the required spell slots. Again, an important distinction we made at a point talking about the Spellfire Sorcerer is that in 2024, casters, NPC spellcasters do not have spell slots. We've already established why the change to counterspell is that way. Because of that, this is further saying that while they don't have spell slots, so traditionally they would not be able to participate in circle casting, this is a rule kind of stating that, specific beats general, that they can at your DM's discretion. Spell failure. If a circle spell fails, nothing happens. You don't expend a spell slot, which is good. Any material components aren't consumed, and you must cast the spell again, starting over, which is good. So you're not getting penalized for, let's say, one of the NPC spellcasters losing concentration. You don't get penalized for that. You just lose kind of the associated action. All right, circle casting options. The following options provide a way to enhance a spell when casting it as a circle spell. You can use only one circle spell casting option on a spell at a time, so you can't stack them. And some spells, as I mentioned before, have a casting as a circle spell section in their description. That's obviously going to be only on new spells going forward. It won't be retroactive unless Wizards of the Coast does a sort of retroactive like errata or free document, which I would be actually very happy with. But right now, you're only going to get this going forward. So some spells, there's some new spells in this book that have like their description, and then they have a subsection that says casting as a circle spell and gives you a unique option for that spell only. For example, I forget what spell this is, but you can see there's a ton of red wizards casting it together. I believe it's one of like the Doom spells that's in this book. I believe that's them using the circle magic option here. Instead of following the usual options, you can create the effect described in that section when casting that spell as a circle spell. Such effects are often uniquely powerful and specific to their respective spells. However, another important distinction, it doesn't say that you can't cast that spell using the circle magic options that are here if one of these is more beneficial to you in the moment. It just has its own unique option if you want to try to replicate that. All right, so augment is first. When you cast a spell with a range of at least 5 feet, you can increase the range of the spell by 1,000 feet per secondary caster up to a 1 mile increase. So if you are, it has a range of at least 5 feet, so no touch spells, but like let's say you have a 10-foot reach thorn whip or something, right? You're going to cast it. Then you have one secondary caster, you've bumped the range of that spell out to 1,000 feet. All right, distribute. When you cast a spell that requires concentration, you can distribute the mental load of the spell among you and the secondary casters. Once the casting time is complete, you and all secondary casters can maintain concentration on this spell. As long as at least one caster who contributed maintains concentration, the spell's effects remain active. So, this is going to have to be a very impactful, very important spell for you to waste all of your allies' concentrations on this as well. Now, I'm not saying that there's not reasons why you would do that. Let's say you want to cast haste on the barbarian or haste on yourself, let's say, and you're like a blade singer, right? You losing haste and losing concentration on it is terrible for you because you're going to lose a whole turn. But if I distribute the concentration amongst a couple people and maybe one of them's hiding in the back and they can just, I mean, that's technically a strategy too, right? Somebody could go invisible, somebody could go hide or put themselves inside total cover while also maintaining concentration on the very impactful spell like haste. So I'm the blade singer. I cast haste on myself and I send it to my other wizard. He's also concentrating, and then they hide themselves someplace where they can't be hit or it's very hard to find them. I can now feel free to wage into combat without worry of losing concentration because my buddy's got backup concentration for me, which is pretty cool. All right, expand. When you cast a spell that creates an area of effect, you can increase one dimension of the spell's area of effect for this casting by 10 feet per secondary caster. For example, if a spell creates a 20-foot radius sphere, like Fireball, casting it as a circle spell with two secondary casters would increase the radius, remember, radius here, not diameter, radius to 40 feet. A spell that creates a line that is 5 feet wide and 300 feet long cast as a circle spell with two secondary casters could make a line that is either 25 feet long or 320 feet long. Wait a minute. Explain that one to me. Okay. Increase the spell by 10 feet per secondary. Oh, with two secondary casters. Yeah. So you could turn your lightning bolt with two secondary casters into a 25-foot wide lightning bolt. That actually, implications of increasing line-based spells into wider lines is pretty wild because, you think about it when you're trying to position yourself on a battlefield, a line-based spell, it's very rare for people to line themselves up and enemies to get themselves perfectly in a line. But, maybe a 10-foot or 15-foot wide line could really do a pretty big number on some enemies, which is pretty cool. Each secondary caster contributing to the spell must expend a spell slot, no action required. If the spell fails, these slots aren't expended. Okay, so distribute to share concentration and augment to increase the range does not require the secondary casters to spend a spell slot. Expand, however, does. But it doesn't say what level of spell they need to expend. Each secondary caster contributing must expend a spell slot. So, reading this, it sounds like you could be a secondary caster and just spend a first level spell slot and get the benefit of this. I guess this would track too because they do say packed magic as an option, which means that a warlock could be overspending or underspending, depending on it. So, any level of spell. So that's actually a potentially really good option to get rid of your first and second level spells at high levels. All right, prolong. When you cast a spell that has a duration of 1 minute or longer, you can increase the duration of the spell depending on the number of secondary casters contributing to the spell as detailed below. Each secondary caster contributing to the spell must expend a spell slot. If the spell fails, these spells aren't expended. So 1 to 3 secondary casters increases the duration by an hour. 4 to 6 increases it by 8 hours, and 7 plus increases it to 24 hours. There's a potential where you could be in a really interesting situation where you have 24 hours of Armor of Agathis or 24 hours of Polymorph. Pretty interesting stuff. No spell slot expenditure for that either. Safeguard. When you cast a spell that creates an area of effect, you can carve out a safe zone within that area of effect that is unaffected by the spell for its duration. The safe zone consists of a number of 5-foot cubes equal to your spellcasting ability modifier plus the number of secondary casters contributing to the spell. You can arrange the cubes as you like, but each cube must be contiguous with at least one other cube. If the spell's area of effect can be removed, the safe zone can be moved. The safe zone moves with it, right? If you're casting an AoE sort of spinning around you sort of emanation, and you move, it moves with you. Or if it's like a moonbeam and you're moving the moonbeam, it would also move with you. And then lastly, here we have supplant. When you cast a spell that requires at least one material component with a specified cost that is consumed by the spell, you can reduce the minimum cost of one such material component by 50 gold pieces per secondary caster contributing to the spell. For example, casting Revivify as a circle spell with two secondary casters would reduce the material component's cost to 200 gold pieces. Each secondary caster contributing to the spell must expend a spell slot, okay, here it is, of a level greater than or equal to the spell's level. If the spell fails, the spell slots aren't expended. Okay, so for supplant, it specifically calls out that it must be of the same level of the spell or higher, and that's sort of the trade-off by reducing the gold piece value by 50 gold per secondary caster. So if you want to use this example where someone's casting Revivify and they only have 200 gold pieces, with two secondary casters, they have to each spend at least a third level or higher spell. This also can make a very impactful moment when, like, you need to bring somebody back from the dead, but you don't have it. If everybody can cast spells, or some you can, like, do that moment where everybody chips in a spell to help kind of make it happen, which is pretty cool. And then lastly, here we have Circle Magic in the game. Circle Magic provides unique and strategic ways of altering spellcasting. Here are some general guidelines for implementing Circle Magic in your game. Character level and experience. Though characters of any level can use Circle Magic, characters with access to higher level spells have more avenues to make the most out of Circle Magic. Know your spells. Casting a Circle spell benefits from a solid understanding of how regular spellcasting works. Be sure to study your prepared spells and Circle casting options before the game. Many Circle spellcasting options provide the most benefits to spellcasting when used outside of combat. Again, the duration increase for Prolong being a huge one, there's a lot of implications for, like, Pass Without Trace being 24 hours. Fantastic. Maybe even being multiple shared concentration. There's a lot of interesting things you can do with these out of combat long duration spells. So consider how you're going to use those, right? A 24-hour detect magic is not bad either. Because again, that can be cast as a ritual. So, like, there's a lot of interesting things you can do, but you have to expend a spell slot for circle magic. So consider ritual spells won't work, because I just caught myself in that one, right? A ritual spell doesn't expend a spell slot. But anyway, there's ways you can do some interesting stuff with this. And lastly, plan ahead. Circle magic function best when participants strategize ahead of time. To avoid bogging down combat, work together with fellow spellcasters to determine how and when to cast a circle spell. Additionally, ensure all participants will have ample opportunity to cast spells and act independently beyond contributing to the circle magic. Yeah, I mean, this is all good advice. We've seen a lot of good advice come in the form of Dungeon Master advice from the 2024 rules anyway. Basically, what it's saying is know your shit, right? Know your spells. Realize and recognize at the table that while you may have a very badass method of using a circle spell, you're basically just making your other fellow spellcasters secondary aspects to your big spell. Make sure they get to do the thing, and maybe sure you may jump in and help them with the circle casting. Also, if it, probably the most interesting thing out of all of this, I mean, I obviously love the concept of circle magic. It also seems like they co-opted a lot of the things that were eventually part of the memorize and modify and create spell options from the Wizards Unearthed Arcana, to make that sort of into circle magic. But probably the most interesting thing is now spells going forward having specific circle magic options, and the whole new avenue of homebrewing spells going forward that now have access to a circle magic option that's unique to that spell specifically. So anyway, let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. Next time, we're going to be talking all about all of the new spells contained within this book, and there is a fair few. I'd say there's probably around 15 or so. So if you want to see that, make sure to stay tuned to the channel. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.